It is autumn, my friends. My studio has been made spoopy. I am burning every fall candle I can find, and my thoughts are turning to wool. It also happens to be my birthday, so I decided to give myself a present of a new skirt. Also, part of the gift is that it gets to be a simple project since I need a break from complex and long-term sewing tasks. I have 2 yards of a beautiful mid-weight wool from Fabric Mart, and I'll link to them down below, that I bought for the express purpose of making myself something modern, and since this wool has a beautiful drape and weight, I decided to make a circle skirt. So please join me for a little autumnal sewing jaunt. I won't go into the details of how I did all of this because there are some excellent tutorials and calculators which made all of this math very easy, and of course I will link to them down below in the descriptions. I used the Miss Make sewing tutorial and the Omni skirt calculator. I decided to do a 3/4 circle since I didn't want this to be too full, which does make it ever so slightly more complicated, but I promise you this is a very easy project, even if you're bad at math like I am. Here's a tip. If you're having trouble finding your natural waist for measuring, tie a ribbon around you. It will naturally settle where your waist is so you can easily measure. I plugged my numbers into the Omni skirt calculator, which gave me the difficult measurements like the radius, and then I used the Miss Make tutorial on how to draft out the pattern for the 3/4 circle skirt and actually drew it out. This was by far the hardest part of the whole project, and this was actually really easy, so don't be intimidated by what looks like a lot of math. It's really not scary. Because my wool is limited and precious, I did make a muslin out of this to make sure the waist fits well and the length was good. And of course, I had to get a preview of the twirl. Annoyingly, my fabric is about 1 inch too narrow for my pattern, but I didn't want to fold it in the other direction because it does have a directional nap, so instead I'm going to shorten my pattern by about 1 inch. Once the 2 side seams were sewn in, I'm attaching my waistband, and I'm still doing this while it's flat because it's just so much easier to attach a waistband to a flat piece of fabric rather than one that's been sewn up into a tube. The directions advise you to use an interfacing here, but given that my fabric has a lot of body, I'm going to skip that step. This wool is sturdy enough to forgo interfacing. And now, because I can't stand it, I have to at least get a preview of what the wool is going to look like. Oh, it's even better than I imagined. This fabric is so beautiful. I am, of course, going to do some hand sewing on this. 1, because I just like hand sewing, and 2, because this wool is plush and bouncy, it's a little hard to do the turn unders that are needed for finishing some of the edges. I need the greater control of hand sewing here. The instructions want me to use a zipper, but I have never once in my entire life put in a zipper, and I really don't feel like learning right now. Remember how I said this was supposed to be a simple project? So instead I'm going to add a placket and close with snaps and hooks and bars. My gift to you is that I'm not showing you how I put in the snaps in the wrong direction 4 times and had to redo them. You're welcome! Now, because this is a circle and grain lines are weird, the directions recommend that you let this hang overnight so everything can settle and stretch and then even out the hem. So we'll save that part for day 2. I ended up with a strange amount of extra fabric on this project, and I didn't want something like this to go to waste because it's just so lovely. So I thought a capelet would be a fun and simple way to use this up. Luckily, I already have an Edwardian capelet made using a truly Victorian pattern, so I'm just going to trace this sucker out and make a very, very simple new pattern. Because of the shape, I can't cut this with the grain line going the way it should. Okay, let's stop and have a word about grain lines. They are super important, and you should always, always, always follow the grain line given in a pattern. Fabric cut off the grain can do weird things and will misbehave in unpredictable ways. I'm totally going rogue and cutting this weird, but it's a very conscious decision in this one instance. Because this fabric is sturdy and it's being used for something like a capelet, I don't think it's going to mess itself up too much. I would never do this on anything that required any kind of fitting or was going to be under any strain or weight. Okay, off my soapbox, let's continue. This is so easy to make that I almost feel a little guilty about it. It only has one seam up the back and then it's practically done, except for a design choice that I think is going to be really lovely. Because this fabric is so thick, I don't want to turn under the edges since I think it'll make it too stiff, so instead I'm going to bind them. I have two good options, a vintage chocolate brown velvet ribbon and a brownish gray ribbon with wavy edges. I'm not really sure which one will work better, so I'm going to pin on a few inches of each of them and see which one I like best. Okay, it's going to be the velvet. For one thing, it's softer, so it hugs the curves of the capelet better, but I also really love the texture of the velvet against the soft wool. It looks really luxurious and cozy. This was a roll of vintage ribbon I bought off eBay nearly a decade ago, so yay for stash busting. I sewed all of this down by hand so I could ease the ribbon over the curves. This did take a good amount of time, but I think careful finishing is worth the extra time on this step. I'm all about shortcuts, but this is a spot where the extra care really pays off. I also added a band of velvet to act as a collar and a tie at the neckline to help keep it on. It also would have benefited from a large hook and eye in the center, so the weight isn't all on the ribbon holding it on, but I didn't think to do that before I tried it on. Okay, the skirt has now hung overnight, and yes, I am wearing the same dress 2 days in a row. Luckily, because of this fabric, there really wasn't any weird stretching, so I don't need to do anything to even out the hems. Normally, I would do a narrow double turn for a hem like this, but this fabric is really too thick to turn twice. Instead, I'm just going to turn it under once and sew it down. This does leave a raw edge on the interior of the skirt, but I think this wool may be thick enough to hold a cut edge without unraveling too much. And now with that one final step, this outfit is totally done. So excited about my new outfit, especially because it was so easy to make this. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a very cozy day.